Hello and welcome to my podcast, The Power of Audio, Science and AI, supported by Stockholm Music City. I am Jasmine Moradi, your host, and in each episode I'll take you backstage to meet with some of the top audio, science and AI personalities in the world. I will interview entrepreneurs, authors, business experts and thought leaders to learn how and why they're so passionate and determined about what they do. I will give you the knowledge and the insight your business needs to succeed with your audio branding. Once again, I get the pleasure to pick the brain of my friend Dr. Bradley Wimes. In episode 2 of my podcast, I spoke with Bradley about his work in the field of sonic branding at Nielsen Consumer Neuroscience, which you can find on my website. Today, Bradley is the Chief Science Officer at Wavepaths, focusing on music in psychedelic therapy. Bradley has 10 years of academic research experience focusing on the psychology and neuroscience of music, including PhD research at McGill University and postdoctoral work at Harvard and University of California. He has been a research associate at the University of British Columbia in the Department of Psychiatry Institution of Mental Health. He has more than 25 scientific publications, including 14 peer-reviewed articles. Best of all, music is his life, and he is a saxophonist. In this episode, Bradley and I are going to discuss the ins and outs of music in psychedelic therapy. With that, Bradley, I welcome you for joining us again.
Well, thank you, Jasmine. It's a delight to be here with you again.
And music therapy is very close to my heart. It is actually the core reason I am so driven about the power of music. And as you know, I'm awaiting to do my master's in music therapy. So let us jump directly into it. We are living in the middle of a pandemic. And I read that before Corona, it was predicted that by 2030, depression would be the leading global disease burden and that mental health costs will increase to $16 trillion. So now with the outbreak of the pandemic, through your lens, how is Corona affecting our mental health and what long-term consequences can we expect?
So as you pointed out already, we face many challenges with mental health, not only being that these issues are quite widespread, but they're also difficult to treat. So there are many patients who are treatment resistant with the current treatments that are available. And coronavirus is only making this worse, being that now some of the activities that ward off, for example, depression, just moving around, exercise, being active physically, that is very helpful for keeping people in good mental health. And then, of course, there are issues related to enjoying physical presence of other people. Touch is very healthy and good for us. And so we're missing all of these important parts of life that contribute to positive mental health. And so people that are on the margins may fall into mental health issues, not to mention the fact that millions of people are without a job who were working before and so on, and others who still need work. And so I think it's compounding the challenge. Absolutely.
And I remember we in Sweden didn't actually really have a lockdown when things hit in March this year. However, because of my mom is in a risk zone, I decided to stay home during the 6 weeks at least, because we didn't really know what it was and you didn't want to go out and figuring out. So it was better to stay home. And I remember that when I decided to go out and meet with some friends at a restaurant, actually, it was very difficult for me. I felt like in the beginning when I came into the restaurant, I didn't know how to greet people. And second of all, they all were like come on, go on and sit. And I was a little bit feeling like, no, I think I'm going to stand here a little bit. So it can be also like subconsciously, right? Like the fear somehow isolate us. And that can be very, very dangerous. Even if you're not suffering really from the depression, it creates bad habits and emotions. Now of course, you're a doctor. I mean, in terms of research doctor, of course, and you've been a research associate at the University of British Columbia, as I mentioned. Tell us how you ended up there and about your experience and the findings in the lab.
Sure, sure. And before I did, just building on your point about how this has disrupted everyday life, I was speaking with my colleagues in the consumer neuroscience world, where we're interested in implicit processing and basically, for example, I was talking with Sarah Yu, who's another cognitive neuroscientist, and discussing how this COVID situation makes a lot of what's usually non-conscious conscious. So we are burdened with having to think consciously about all kinds of things we just took for granted before. Whether to stand or sit down, whether to shake hands or not. How to greet someone, whether to speak loudly or not, or how much can we laugh and stuff. All these things that just are natural for us, or are now top of mind. We have to think about them consciously, and so we kind of can sustain a certain amount of burden on our attentional resources, but now that's really been inundated by this additional need to pay attention to everything. So I think that also kind of makes it difficult for everyone. And again, people on the margins are going to find this too much to handle as far as mental health is concerned. And we're all suffering. So, but as far as, yes, so my work at the University of British Columbia, so I had the opportunity to do really fascinating research there with Alan Young. I was also working with Tony Phillips. These are folks who are in the mental health field. Alan Young is now at King's College London in the UK, but we did a project where we were interested in neuroplasticity in music. So neuroplasticity is related to so many different mental health issues. You can think of stroke, you can think of depression, which is related to certain patterns that develop in the brain around rumination and negative thinking. So how can you change the brain in a way that's more healthy? This study was looking at how to change epigenetics in the brain using a drug commonly used as a mood stabilizer, as a brain stabilizer for bipolar depression and also for epilepsy. It's called Valproate, valproic acid. It's known by other names as well. But it has this unique feature in that it actually blocks a certain enzyme that prevents the expression of genes. So someone who's taking this will actually have a change in their epigenetic expression of genes related to learning that are present early in life in what's called a critical period of learning. So we were interested in seeing, could we take the adult human brain and change the epigenetic state so it's more malleable like it is early in life? And we used as a test for this the learning of absolute pitch, or perfect pitch, it's sometimes called. This is where you can name musical tones just by hearing them without any reference. And you basically have to learn this by the time you're about 9 years of age. If you haven't picked it up by then, you probably won't. So it's called a critical period ability. It's related to a critical period of learning. So this was a randomized placebo-controlled trial. We had one group of young adult men who took Valproate, another group that took a placebo, and they underwent training for during a period while they were taking the drug for 2 weeks, and then they came back and we tested them to see how they did on this absolute pitch skill, and found that the Valproate group had significantly improved relative to random chance and also relative to the placebo control group. So that was quite fascinating, and it opens the door to thinking about how we can use epigenetics to help to change the brain in ways that are meaningful and interesting. This was it was a collaboration with obviously psychiatry, so people that knew about Valproate and how to use that safely, but also epigeneticists. And we had Takao Hench from Harvard. We had Michael Kobor, who's a geneticist. We had Janet Worker, who's a developmental psychologist interested in critical period learning. So it was a fantastic cross-disciplinary effort at UBC.
And when you got those findings, what did you guys do with it? You, of course, you wrote, I'm sure, a paper about it, but also there's a challenge between research and the real world, is that it really needs a bridge in between. And how do we take the research we conduct and implement it so we can actually reach out to more people and help it? What is your take on that? Is that possible, and how?
Yes. So this was published. It would be absolutely viewed as a pilot study, a first exploration into this kind of work in humans. Similar research had been done with animal models by Takao Hench and others, but this kind of brought it into an option for working with humans, with people. So the next step is going to be building on this, looking at larger samples, looking at potential clinical groups that might benefit, and basically moving the knowledge forward. So a hypothesis seems to have some support for it in terms of being able to change the epigenetic state of the brain in the adult human. And let's see what we can do to help people with that knowledge.
And looking back in the history of medicine and up to now, what have been the traditional methods to treat depression, PTSD, and other mental health conditions? And what are the benefits and the challenges with the traditional methods and with the typical psychedelic therapy process?
So traditionally, there have been behavioral approaches, like cognitive behavioral therapy, psychotherapy, various kinds that involve interactions between a therapist and a client or a patient. And that is an approach that's proven to be valuable. And then there are drug treatments like SSRIs, and basically ways of trying to influence serotonin levels in the brain and other kinds of neurotransmitters that have also proven to be helpful for some people. The issue is that there are still people who aren't helped by these options, and also we don't fully understand how these treatments work. So there are questions left unanswered, and ultimately we haven't really made leaps and bounds in our understanding or in the development of treatments for decades at this point, as far as really qualitative steps forward. So that's where psychedelic therapy, or therapy with psychedelic assisted therapies that involve treatments like psilocybin, MDMA, ketamine, these are emerging as very promising ways to address these mental health challenges. Yeah.
Sorry, what are those you mentioned? The three of them? Are they drugs, or are there methods? And
those are drugs that are being used quite commonly and that are emerging as quite likely uses of these kinds of medicines in order to help with mental health. And there are clinics popping up all around the world with the ability to deliver ketamine to help people with depression and other kinds of issues, psilocybin for treating end of life anxiety, people with a terminal illness will be will benefit from treatment with psilocybin. It looks like there's evidence for that. Psilocybin for treating different kinds of addiction. It's even been found to be quite helpful for people with nicotine addiction, which is one of the most difficult to overcome. So several different issues in mental health seem to be addressed by one or more of these drugs that are available.
So where does music's role fit in therapy? Like, can you tell us a little bit back in the history and what's going on?
Sure. So music has been used ubiquitously with these kinds of treatments. It was used intuitively, but also consciously by researchers that are employing psychedelic therapies. And you can understand why, because it basically helps with these settings. So there are these elements that help to make these kinds of therapies particularly effective. The set and the setting, the set being the intentions, the mental state of the patient, the setting being all of the environmental variables. And psilocybin, for example, basically creates more entropy in the brain. It enables connections that aren't usually possible to occur in the brain, and that creates this potential for neuroplasticity, openness to new experience, change in the way the brain works, hopefully in a positive way. So being there's all this kind of new chaos, you could say, in the brain, or entropy, having some structure that's very positive and supportive in the environment, which you can control, is helpful. And music is a wonderful way to do this. A lot of these therapies involve having your eyes closed. So either with some kind of mask, or even with just the eyes closed. And so visuals aren't the ideal way to control or provide structure. Also, there's a lot of inner imagination and imagery that's going on. So whereas with music, this is something that the person is experiencing continuously. They will hear this even if they're not paying attention to it. It's a very helpful way to influence mood and to create calm, or to support different emotional states. So that's really where music is very powerful. It has the potential to affect implicitly, without conscious focus, and also to support different kinds of emotion for the person as they're undergoing this kind of therapy.
Your company mentioned something about no magical pill. What do you guys mean by that? And why is a setting in the music design essential for a successful outcome in the therapy?
Well, so building on what we were just talking about, music has a great potential to help, but how to use music is still a question mark. And certainly there are some practices that have been developed. A lot of people use playlists, classical music, other kinds of music that they really enjoy. But as far as what the best parameters are for delivering just the right music for this participant, this patient or client, that is yet to be determined through research. And it's clear from all of this work that's been happening in clinical settings and also research settings that not everyone benefits from the same music. So that is really what that means. It's not a magic pill, in that at least the music, at least in terms of how the music is involved, it's not certain to work. The same kind of music won't work for everyone. As you can imagine, people have varying interests in music, varying tastes, and also in different states of mind. We might like certain music more than others. If you change your state of mind, you might prefer other music. So how do you tailor the music to the person in the moment? That's really the clinical and scientific challenge here.
I've actually met some people that say that they don't even like music.
Mm,
And it's, for me, it's very interesting to hear that, because there's so many different dimension of music. It doesn't really have to be with lyrics or popular. It can also be sound. Like, I was in India for a yoga retreat, and then they have these, what they call it, you know,
mm,
there's a
mm,
bowl sound.
mm,
I mean, that is also extremely healing. And it's, I mean, I love listening to it. It's something happens in my body. So it's really interesting to understand what is it about sound that they don't like. But at the same time, I sometimes say that silence is better than having a lot of noise. So,
mm.
I mean, listening too much music can also be extremely stressful. I got the chance to experience one of Wavepath's deep listening sessions. It was a 30 minutes session, and for me it was like medicine to my soul. It was great because I did it middle of the day. I took a break, and I really needed that. So tell us about Wavepaths and the purpose and what you guys do and what is your role.
Certainly. So Wavepaths is a creation of Mendel Kalin, who has a PhD from Imperial College London, the first PhD to focus on music in psychedelics. He looked at the effect of psychedelics on the music experience and also the effect of music on psychedelic therapies. In his research, which included neuroimaging as clinical populations, healthy populations. So his insight was that music is playing an incredibly powerful role. You could even look at psychedelic therapy as a kind of music therapy that enables music to do even more than it would normally. And as we were discussing, it's been used as an important setting variable throughout much of the psychedelic therapy that's gone on through the ages. That's across cultures as well. If you look at ayahuasca ceremonies, there's music involved, and look elsewhere, you'll see that drumming and music plays a role in a lot of these kinds of ceremonies, and we could call those therapies. So how can we maximize the potential of this setting variable? That's really the goal of Wavepaths, is to say, let's get this right. Let's get the music right. So it's tailored to the individual, to the personal preferences of the individual for different kinds of music, to the personality factors of that individual. Some people may be open to a broader spectrum of music. Some may have preference for a narrower spectrum of musical styles. And basically to be able to respond not just to those overall trait factors, you could say, but also to the state of the individual in terms of the goals of this particular session. Maybe they're having multiple sessions, or this session is aimed at some kind of cathartic effect or some kind of calming effect, or whatever the effect that we're looking for with this session. And then also within the session, as it's evolving, looking at the state of the individual, biometric state, the mental state, how can we figure out what's going on in the mind and physiology and neurophysiology of this person in order to select just the right music that supports that state and also supports whatever the therapeutic goal is. So these are the lofty ambitions of Wavepaths. And the way that the system works is to take curated music that's been contributed by some wonderful composers that create music just for this system and tailored to this system. And then an artificial intelligence puts together those elements of music in real time to create this continuous sound space that's evolving with the experience of the person that's undergoing the treatment.
So is this like a product that the therapist will use, or is it also a product like if I wanted to use it from home?
It will be for both, actually. So if someone wants to have a therapeutic musical experience, this will be available for self-administering music to go through an emotional process. So that is going to be available to the public soon. And also therapists. So right now we already have a beta product that therapists are using, and that product is basically something that therapists take advantage of when they're working with their clients. So they will use the interface to deliver music, to change the music as needed over the course of a session, etc. So it's set up. It has the intelligence necessary to do to be useful for clinicians. But there will certainly be a version available as well for anyone who wants to take advantage of the music and the therapeutic potential of that music.
Do you have your own musicians that you guys work with to add the music, or where does the music come from?
So it does come from professional musicians, people like Brian Eno, a lot of wonderful composers that create these sonic landscapes. And as mentioned, they're licensed just for this platform. So the music will not be heard. These are musicians that have catalogs of music available on streaming services and albums and so on, but they're making the effort to create this music that's specifically intended for this therapeutic purpose within Wavepaths.
Okay, and that was going to be a little bit my other question, is that the past years there have been a lot of apps popping up offering even I mean, I'm not going to mention names, doesn't matter, but there's like one that says that their music is based on neuroscience, and another one does a lot of commercial where it's like take a 20 minutes or 30 minutes pause during the day. What makes them different than to what you guys are trying to achieve?
So the difference is all of these apps and music products may be very helpful, and you know, as you're well aware, you know, music therapy is very powerful for all of us. We're likely self-administering musical medicine throughout our lives in different ways, whether we think about it consciously or not. The unique element of Wavepaths is this understanding that getting the music right in the context of psychotherapy or in particular psychedelic assisted therapy can make a huge difference for these kinds of therapeutic outcomes. And the system is set up to take into account variables related to the drugs involved. So if you input that you're using ketamine, the system knows, well, ketamine acts in this way. It has a certain duration of effect. It has a certain timing for how long it takes to really peak, and then how long the peak is, and then when does the experience start to return to normal, how long that takes. So it understands all of these based on the dose, based on the way the dose is delivered, etc. And that really enables you to, as a therapist, create a session that's very specific and not worry about it so much. So therapists have a lot to handle as it is. So this kind of takes one element off their plate, something they don't have to worry about so much. It's a tool in their tool belt that they can apply and have a lot of control over the course of the music as it unfolds. They can also create emotional changes that are going to be oriented to the kinds of states that the therapy is supposed to create for this individual in this session.
What would be the long-term uh, purpose or vision? Is it that music in therapy like you will take over, you will treat people more and more with music while you understand it, and really much like try to remove drugs? Or are we trying to see like a combination to make it a little stronger, make it more powerful and more effective?
So a little bit of both. I would say it's definitely, it serves two purposes. One is safety, so reducing problematic experiences, so creating a kind of safe structure in which these experiences can unfold. One way you can think about music is as standing in for different systems in the brain or psyche. So with Parkinson's disease, music kind of is like a pacemaker for the motor system. It helps smooth and movement, whereas that system is not functioning as normal. Music helps to create that structure there. Or with people with very advanced Alzheimer's, music can help activate a sense of self. It can stand in for the self and activate these memories. And then in this case, where people are experiencing a loss of or a disintegration of the sense of self, in fact, in the moment, the music may provide some structure in place of that. So it kind of acts as this holding structure that provides a sense of continuity while the normal sense of I, or the singular separate entity, is dissipating. So that's one hypothesis about what's going on here, and the way that it can really serve to help people that are undergoing these therapies. So that's really where Wavepaths is aiming to step in and just find the right music that is tailored to the individual in the moment as that moment is unfolding. Also, being that this is there's an artificial intelligence that's built into this. It's layering this music in a continuous fashion. So whereas a lot of therapies use sequences of tracks, let's say, on a recording device or a streaming service, where there are kind of breaks, there's a beginning and end to each piece. With Wavepaths, it's a continuity. So sometimes there's a fade to silence, but that's out of some artistic intent. But otherwise, there's this continuity of sound. And when you're moving from one emotional space to another, when you're moving between the content provided by Greg Haynes or John Hopkins or one of the other composers, there's a seamless movement. So the system is just kind of layering things and moving to the other emotional spaces. And that's also very helpful to avoid any kind of break in the experience where it's suddenly you're feeling like, where's the music?
I think in this case, compared to music and branding, I think definitely that being subjective and personalized music is super important. I actually read an article last year, was listening to the music you love will make your brain release more dopamine. And it was by Laura Ferrari, an associate professor in cognitive psychology in Lyon University. And I do believe that this is also a big success behind Spotify, that personalizes your music experience. Something happens when we love what we are listening to, and also with Spotify, what it helps with is, okay, if you listen to this track, what about this track? And it's also a lot of based on AI. And You were a little bit mentioning it. I know you're not into tech that much, but it's interesting to understand a little bit more than how you guys work with the personal experience, and how do you work with the AI, because it is said that AI is only as good as you teach it.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Definitely. And we've known about music and dopamine and the striatum, and from the work of Robert Zatorre and others in the world of music and neuroscience. So we do know that, and furthermore, music has been used as a mood induction technique for decades, or perhaps throughout human history, really. So we know this power of music, and that brings us to the point: how can we use data to really move the needle here? How can we use it to make intelligent decisions in the moment? And that's a work in progress, really. It involves identifying target states. So there are certain things or the field of psychedelic assisted therapy research is figuring out, like, what does it look like in the moment as the experience is underway, when someone is having an experience that is leading to a positive, beneficial therapeutic outcome. And there have been some interesting findings. So work at Imperial College London by Rodman Carhart Harris and colleagues, and David Nutt's group there have and others around the world have found an interesting correlation between how personally meaningful the experience is and beneficial therapeutic outcomes. So it's interesting that intense states of transcendence, this feeling of a loss of self, and very powerful and meaningful experiences like that, the more someone has that, the more likely they're to benefit from the therapy. So that gives us some guidance. So how can then you use music to support arriving at those kinds of states? So it's really about identifying target states that correlate with reported experiences, but also with physiology and neurophysiology, and then training the system to deliver music that leads a person in that direction. So that's really what we're aiming for.
What would you say then is the dream scenario? Like, if it was Nevada in the research you do, what would be that Nevada finding?
Yeah, and that gets back to your earlier question. So yes, music is very helpful for creating stability, for reducing the likelihood of adverse reactions, creating calm where needed. But it also has the potential to enhance the intensity and benefits of the therapy. So you raise the idea that with music, you might need less drug to arrive at the same beneficial state. And this has been used in pain therapies, for example. There is pretty strong evidence that having music involved in post-treatment, post-operative treatments can lead to the need for less analgesics, like morphine and so on. So there is that model where music can kind of play this role where you need less drug to achieve the same state. Perhaps the same thing can happen here. So music can help enable these states of consciousness and experience that are therapeutically valuable with less drug. And that, of course, reduces the chances of adverse reactions. I think that the dream state, actually, from the perspective of Wavepaths, is that the music is so good and so tuned in to what you need that you don't need any psychedelic drug actually to achieve the states that are really beneficial. And this goes back to ideas around, for example, motherese and parent-child vocalizations, where the parent is vocalizing in ways that are continually attuning themselves to the child to keep the child in a state, a positive state. And can you imagine a system that's tuned in to what you need and to deliver music that's just suited for arriving at states of mind and experience that are really helpful and beneficial?
It's very interesting what you say, because what I believe in when it comes to medicine and depression and healing is, why wait until we have the pain and we have the problem? Like, music is a huge part of our life from the day we are birthed, and even in the stomach, because we can hear the heartbeat of the mother, that it can be used to not end up in depression or getting some kind of other mental health diseases in the future, that we use it constantly in our daily lives. And that's how I see that music, as I say, it has saved my life. Is like everybody else, I was hit by depression or anxiety when I was 20, and working in the event industry, I later on, like 10 years later, when I started doing music research, I actually found out by myself, it's like, music really helped me a lot, and that I use it in my daily life. It won't forever cure me, because I will be suffering from anxiety, uh, but I can use it as a tool whenever I feel bad to bring me up again. And this, what do you think about that? To use it constantly in your daily life to prevent mental health.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I think it's definitely a powerful uh, you know, tool, or a powerful you know, support available to us, and well, we're surrounded by music and access to music, and we can take advantage of that. And it's you know, it definitely has these effects implicitly. We talked about that in the context of consumer neuroscience. Music is influencing us, whether we are paying attention or not, and we can use that to our advantage and find music that's soothing, find music that's energizing. And it's part of sports psychology now. It's thinking about how to use music to get better outcomes for athletes, and for people that want to calm down. There's plenty of playlists out there that play calming music. It's amazing how effective it is, how much it can change the way we're feeling. And it's just a button press away, but maybe making that leap, or trying it, is there are still barriers to that. And especially when we're in a difficult state of mind, we're not thinking well at those moments. We're not at our best to do what's most helpful for ourselves. So it's good to make these things available as possible, and then talking about it as well, and keeping it top of mind. So maybe it will come to mind. It's like, wow, I'm kind of feeling agitated. I feel so concerned about what's happening or what just happened. And yeah, I could take a few deep breaths and listen to something interesting, or put it on the background, just to create a different atmosphere for myself.
And before we've talking about in the context of consumer neuroscience, that how powerful music is when it comes to the memory. And that is so interesting. When I saw a YouTube clip about a man that had Alzheimer's, and he had not been able to communicate or move at all for years. And then this team comes in and they ask his relatives, so what kind of music did he listen to when he grew up? What kind of music did he like when he was, older? And then they put together a tape, and then they put on headphones on him, and he's in the beginning like non-communicative, and then when he starts listening, you just see the eyes are becoming bigger, and he's just more alert, and then he starts talking. He can even respond to questions which he couldn't do. He remembers things from his life which was more challenging. And then on top of that, now during that now the period of time, I saw on Instagram that is a video that is circulating, and the account is Música para Desperata is a Spanish, where we can see like an ex ballerina that has Alzheimer's, and she gets the chance to listen to swan music from where she was dancing, and you can see instantly she's moving her hands, she's dancing almost exactly, well, she's sitting down but with her arms like she did before. And oof, I get goosebumps by just talking about it. So excited. So explain to us this phenomenon.
Right. Yeah, this is wonderful. I've seen that video, and there's a wonderful documentary, Alive Inside, that explores music, the effect of music on people with advanced Alzheimer's, and that's a great thing to see if you can. So what happens with music is it has all these structural features that make it very sticky in the brain, so to speak. It has rhythm, it has melodic structure, it has harmonic structure, and then when it has lyrics or vocals, it can have vocal timbre and also lyrical structure. So rhyming, just words themselves, patterns, imagery associated with the words. So all of these aspects of the music basically are very useful. They're like grip holds for the brain, and the brain is constantly looking for pattern in information and building predictions. And this enables music related memories to be very deeply ingrained. And you see this even when there's enormous degradation to the functioning of the brain, loss of so many other functions, music can still access the self in people with advanced Alzheimer's, for example. And it really does create some of the most enduring memories. Nostalgia is very powerful with music in particular. It can trigger, send us to a different time and place. So this is one of the reasons music is such an interesting and powerful instrument. If you'll pardon the pun. So it also plays into psychedelic therapies in this way. There's an integration process. So if you undergo a psychedelic therapy session, you will have some integration afterwards. So these experiences are often ineffable, hard to describe, and hard to remember. And afterwards, usually part of the integration process is to remember everything that you experience and try to kind of bring it into your life, kind of like remembering dreams sometimes. But the music may help with that process, because music, as we were just talking, creates these opportunities for tagging memories. Just like you might hear music and you'll be transported to some drive you were on cross country when that music was on the road, or some event in your life that was meaningful. So too, having varied and interesting music during a session may act as kind of a time series, or give time stamps to these different experiences. So when the person listens to that music after the fact, it brings to mind, it helps to create this recollection process that then can lead to greater insights and a stronger integration of the experiences.
And now for our listener, how can they themselves, at firstly at home, use music in therapy during this pandemic? We have a lot of listeners probably are stuck at home. I mean, of course, a lot of people use music daily, but how can they use it in form as a therapy at home?
So for that, I think it's really about making it accessible to yourself. And I think playing music is a really wonderful thing. There's plenty of research that shows that singing creates many positive physiological changes and makes us breathe deeply, for example, and that it can be very therapeutic to engage in creating music, and then listening to music that's going to be beneficial for us. I mean, one thing in the world of music neuroscience research that's been really interesting to me is that it really reveals neuroplasticity. So learning of music has been a very interesting model for neuroplasticity, that is looking at changes in the brain, because there are people who didn't learn music, how to play an instrument or something. So you can take that adult and have them sit down at a piano and have them start learning a bit, and then look at what's changing in the brain. And it's a very constrained kind of situation. You're looking at auditory motor associations, maybe auditory motor visual, if you're reading music. And with only 20 minutes of practice, researchers have seen measurable significant changes in brain function. So the brain is changing very quickly when someone is practicing music in this case. But so too is the case that listening to music creates changes in the brain. You're recognizing patterns, you're developing expectations, you're responding emotionally. And so, I mean, one thing just to think about is how malleable the brain is, and what you're putting into it is having an effect. Just keeping that in mind a little bit may make us choose things that are slightly more beneficial. So just awareness can make us more sensitive to what we're giving to ourselves, understanding that that will influence us and have an effect going forward.
That's amazing. And my advice would be, as soon as you feel down, use music as the tool of trying to bring yourself up. And during this pandemic, as you mentioned, what the best I would say sitting at home is, start learning how to sing, or start up with an instrument that you never had time because you were so busy with commuting back and forward. Amazing. Thank you very much. And can I ask you, what are the next steps now for Wavepath?
So Wavepaths just released an update to the clinician users that are using the beta system, which is great. So now there's a better interface. Early next year, there's going to be a release publicly, so where there's going to be an opportunity for more clinicians to utilize the system. At a later point, it'll be available to non-clinicians as well, and there will be an opportunity for basically anyone to use the system. And so that's a big next step. Beyond that, it's furthering these collaborations we have that we're fortunate to be a part of with the clinician scientists at these research institutions, and also furthering our internal iterative research program that's basically making the music more diverse, also much more, just a stronger prediction model for how the music will affect states of mind. So that's an ongoing process internally as well.
And for the listeners that are interested to learn more about Wavepath and sign up and become a user, and support even, where can they go?
Sure. So wavepaths.com is the website. You can check that out. We have launched a Seeders campaign. That's SEEDRS campaign. It's a fundraising. It can be micro fundraising or any amount of funds that would be as an investment. So if you wanted to actually be an investor in the company, that's an option. And then just keeping an eye out. I think it's possible to get on the mailing list if you're interested in looking for being updated when there's a new release and this becomes available to the public.
Amazing. Thank you very much, Bradley. This was once again an amazing episode with you, and we learned so much. And I so much look forward to what's coming up in the research, and for us to heal the world through music. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Jasmine. It's such a pleasure speaking with you, and I really think it's fantastic you're bringing these ideas out and sharing them with people.
Well, that's all for today's episode of The Power of Audio, Science and AI. I'm Jasmine Moradi, your host, and thank you very much for listening. If you like this podcast and want to follow my journey towards discovering the secrets behind the power of audio, science and AI, then make sure to never miss an episode by subscribing on my website, jasminemoradi.com, YouTube, Spotify, iTunes and Google Play. I'm working towards increasing the value of music so that artists receive the fair share of the economic value they create in our society. So make sure to spread the word to your fellow brand leaders and business networks through your social media. Stay tuned for my next episode where I will speak to my friend Thomas Liddy, head of AI at MusicMap. We're going to talk about the emotional AI and music analyzers and recommendation. This episode is supported by Stockholm Music City, recorded at the Pot booth in the co-working space The Park in Stockholm. Music by Skirk.